أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وشفيع ذنوبنا أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد ثم الصلاة والسلام على آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المظلومين واللعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من يوم عداوتهم إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله تبارك وتعالى: إن الله اشترى من المؤمنين أنفسهم وأموالهم بأن لهم الجنة يقاتلون في سبيل الله فيقتلون ويقتلون وعدا عليه حقا في التوراة والإنجيل والقرآن ومن أوفى بعهده من الله فاستبشروا ببيعكم الذي بايعتم به وذلك هو الفوز العظيم. صلوات على محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Surah At-Tawbah, chapter 9 of the Quran, verse 111. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, indeed Allah has purchased from the faithful, from the believers, their lives and their possessions. And in exchange, He has given them paradise. He has given them Jannah. So they fight in the way of Allah and they slay and they are slain. This is a promise that Allah has taken upon Himself in the Torah and in the Injil and in the Quran. Meaning even the faithfuls at the time of Musa and Isa and at all times were also given this offer. And they took up this amongst the faithful and fought in the way of Allah. And who then is more truthful in His promise than Allah? Therefore rejoice, O believers, in the bargain that you have made with Allah, in the contract that you have taken and signed with Allah. For indeed this is a mighty achievement. This verse of the Quran is the basis of the theme of our series of discussion, which is obstacles to knowing God or to knowing Allah. And last night we concluded that the greatest obstacle to knowing Allah is one's self-will. That will that resists the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we said that this self-will is an obstacle both to atheists as well as to Muslims. Self-will and ego prevents an atheist from accepting Allah because in order to know Allah, in order to surrender to Allah, the ego must be put aside. When you talk of surrender, the first question that comes to mind is surrender to what or to whom? One surrenders to a higher power. If one does not believe in a higher power, then obviously there is nothing to surrender to. So one can only surrender if there is a belief that there is a higher power. And that higher power is what those who believe in God call, those who believe in a higher power call God. So as long as there is denial of a higher power, there will never arise the issue of surrender. And when the issue of surrender does not arise, then there will always be a self-will. One will be guided by one's own illusions and one's own will. And that will keep the ego alive, which will result in pride. And therefore, you will find that the Quran repeatedly says that it is pride which stops people from believing and accepting Allah. Pride is the result of a human being believing he or she is self-sufficient. The cause of the pride could be anything that a person believes to have an excess of. In the past, a lot of times people denied God because of having excessive wealth, for example, or excessive strength, or excessive power, or excessive beauty. In our day and age, where knowledge is the thing that people take pride in, excessive knowledge and excessive intelligence becomes the reason why a person denies God. And that is why Allah says in Surah Al-Iqra, as I mentioned yesterday, إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَيَطْغَى أَنْ رَآهُ اسْتَغْنَى. Indeed, man is rebellious when he sees himself self-sufficient. And that is also why you will often find that when a person is in trouble, they turn towards religion, they turn back towards God, because it brings this jolt, it brings this awakening that one is not as independent and as self-sufficient as one thought one is. Unless, of course, one doesn't believe in the existence of God at all. So that was with regard to the atheist. Now, with regards to the believers, we said when we say obstacles to knowing God, we mean obstacles that prevent one who is faithful from realizing this dependence. In other words, one might already profess with their tongues that they believe in Allah, but that belief that Allah is also in control and that they are completely connected and dependent on Him every moment of their lives is what is missing. So when we discuss it as faithfuls, as believers in God, what are the obstacles to knowing Allah? What we are discussing is how do we get to a point where there is this realization in our lives that Allah is not just one who creates and then leaves us alone. This is an unspoken misunderstanding and assumption that people make, that Allah has created the world, then He leaves people to their own devices, and everything happens on the basis of cause and effect. No, Allah is holding the heavens and the earth from swooning and from disappearing, constantly. That is why in Surah Al-Fatiha we say, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. You have heard many scholars, Dr. Hussain Kimji and others, constantly mention that the word Rabb does not actually mean Lord. It is loosely translated as Lord of the universe. Rabb is one who sustains, one who keeps something alive, who keeps something going, isn't it? In Arabic, Rabb is used for many other contexts. For example, a mother who keeps the house going is called Rabbatul Bayt. She is the Rabba of the house. The ulama and the experts of tafsir make this point when they discuss this ayah of Quran, that the reason why Allah did not say Alhamdulillahi Khaliqul Alameen or Fatirul Alameen, all praises to Allah, the creator of the universe or the originator of the universe, is because Allah does not want us to have this misunderstanding that He created the universe and then He is removed apart from that. No, He said Rabbul Alameen, Alhamdulillahi Rabbul Alameen, to show that after He created, He continues to keep it alive. He continues to sustain and keep this world going. So, in summarizing what we said yesterday, when we say that Allah asks us to surrender to Him and Allah asks us to give control to Him, it is not that we are in control and Allah is saying, move out of the driver's seat, let me sit in the driver's seat and control your life. No, what Allah is saying is, I am already in control. You have very little control. Remove the illusion that you are in control. Remove your resistance to what is. Otherwise you have very little control, as we gave examples yesterday. To give one simple example, we cannot control when we die, and we cannot control where we die. The only thing that our free will allows us to do to a limited degree is how we die. And that is only allowed and necessary because if it wasn't allowed, it would put a blame on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He is the cause when one who is unjust kills one who is innocent. Somebody once asked me this question. He said, supposing a man points a gun at my head and shoots me on a Saturday at 4 p.m. on Young and Bloor on this date. Was this destined to happen? Was it possible that I could have died in any other way except this? You see, the implications of that is now Allah is forcing that man to do it. And where he was leading that question was to say that was Yazid forced to kill Imam Hussein? Now when you study the Quran carefully, you will see that the Quran does not say that Allah is responsible for how you die. He knows how you will die. But He sets when you will die and where you will die. That does not change. In other words, the man who was shot on Young and Bloor on Saturday at 4 p.m. on a particular date in 1997, he would have died on Young and Bloor on Saturday at 4 p.m. at the same place, but not necessarily through being shot or by the same person. He may still have been shot by another person, or he may have just had a heart attack on that place. How can we prove this? A simple example. Last night we talked a little bit about the Battle of Uhud. When the Battle of Uhud took place, to a large extent, the defeat that the Muslims faced was their own fault. Out of their greed for the spoils of war, for the booty, they disobeyed Allah and His Messenger. Allah had promised them victory. And they were indeed winning that battle until a few people who had been placed in a strategic position were told not to move, and they saw the other Muslims already winning the battle and taking possessions of the spoils of war. They disobeyed the Prophet of Allah and ran towards that booty. And because of that, they were attacked from a mountain pass from the front and the back. Those who are interested can go back and refer to the history of the whole incident. Now, after the battle took place, as usual, human beings who are unenlightened look for someone to blame. When they can't find anyone to blame, then obviously God is always there to be blamed. So they began saying, why did this happen to us? When the Messenger of God was with us, and Allah promised us victory, and we are those who have submitted to this true religion, how could those who disbelieve defeat us? How could they kill us in such a manner? 70 of us were killed. And they began saying words that Allah says they were closer to kufr than to iman. Now Allah quotes them in the Quran in more than one place. At one place He quotes the hypocrites. In another place He quotes those Muslims who are weak in faith with the Prophet who complained about this. They said, if we had been on the right path, this is Surah Ali Imran, chapter 3, verse 154. They said, had we been on the right path, then we would not have been killed like this. Now the answer that Allah gives. قُلْ لَوْ كُنْتُمْ فِي بُيُوتِكُمْ لَبَرَزَ الَّذِينَ كُتِبَ عَلَيْهِمُ الْقَتْلِ إِلَى مَضَاجِعِهِمْ. Say to them, O our beloved Prophet, that even if you had been in your homes minding your own business, those who were destined to have died on that day, they would have left their homes and come to the plains of Uhud and died there. But Allah allowed this to happen. And what happened took place. Why? لِيَبْتَلِيَ اللَّهُ مَا فِي صُدُورِكُمْ وَلِيُمَحِّسَ مَا فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ وَاللَّهُ عَلِيمٌ بِذَاتِ الصُّدُورِ. But Allah allowed this to happen so that He may test what is in your chests, and so that He may purge what is in your hearts. For Allah knows what you hide in your chests. What does that mean? That means those amongst you who said with big claims that we are truly Muslims and we submit to Allah, and why doesn't Allah declare jihad so that we may be blessed with martyrdom and so on and so forth, Allah knew who said it sincerely and who did not. So He gave them an opportunity so that that which was in their hearts may manifest itself, so that one who is truthful may be distinguished from one who is a hypocrite, or one who is strong in faith may be distinguished from one who is weak in faith. It is only for this reason that Allah allowed this to happen. But the verse gives us this hint, that even if you had been in your own homes, those who are meant to die on that day, they would have left their homes and come to the plains of Uhud, and they would have died there. And we have experienced this in our own lives. I personally know of incidents where two people are traveling, one on a bus, one in a car. At the last moment, the one on the bus says to the one on the car, let us switch places. I want to go in the car, you go on the bus. And then the car has an accident and everybody perishes and dies. And that is why Amirul Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. He says, your death is fixed for you to a point that sometimes you will exert effort to die without your knowledge. If you are meant to die somewhere in Africa next week, you will travel to that place at that right time and go to the same place that you were meant. You cannot escape. And this is what Allah is trying to say in the Quran. That you fear death as if you have any control. If you surrender and realize that I am in control, then you will be covered with tranquility and peace, because you realize you have the wisdom then to know that you cannot change this. But surrender to me, and I will make it only better for you thereafter. There is an interesting narration that we are told in our books of history, that during the time of the Prophet Sulaiman ala nabina wa alayhi salam, many of you may have heard this, a man came to him. Sulaiman was a king, King Solomon. He had everything under his control, the birds, the animals, the wind. And a man came to him, running to the court of Sulaiman. Ya Nabi Allah, you have control of the winds. Can you please command the winds to carry me and take me away to as far a place as possible from here, to a remote island? Ajib request. Sulaiman says, why? He says, I have just come from the marketplace, and there was this man who looked at me in such a way, it ran a shiver down my spine. And I had a feeling as if he is after my life. And I know he is going to kill me. So in order to escape him, help me get out of this place. Sulaiman has control of the winds and everything. He commands the winds. They carry the man and they take him to a remote island away from the kingdom of Sulaiman. Now, a few moments later, the angel of death comes to Sulaiman, Malakul Maut. He says to him, Ya Nabi Allah, I have witnessed the most amazing thing today. So Sulaiman says to him, what have you witnessed, O Israel? He says, today I was in the marketplace and I saw this man, and I knew I have been commanded that after 1 hour I'm supposed to take his soul on an island that is remote and far from here. And I was thinking to myself, this man is here. How is he going to get to that island in 1 hour? I have been told I have to take his soul in 1 hour from now. How will I ever get there? How will he get there in 1 hour? So you cannot escape this. Allah has decreed this for us. And when a human being realizes that his free will is a very limited window that Allah gives you an opportunity to work on, and it is like a knife that Allah places in your hand that you could use for good or for evil. It is only for the accumulation of your deeds, so that that which is in your heart is brought out and your true identity is known, so that you are placed where you deserve on the Day of Judgment. Besides that, Allah is in complete control. Now this sort of wraps up that discussion from yesterday to talk about the surrender of Allah. We want to take this discussion to another level tonight, inshaAllah. If you can recite as-salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. The question we ask now is, if we succeed in dropping this illusion, this obstacle, this self-will, what happens to the person? What happens when a man removes the illusion and the self-will and therefore surrenders to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Before we actually answer that question, there is another discussion that we must briefly bring in that is actually connected to this. In some of the series that I have discussed in the past, we have talked about how a human being is a mirror that reflects the attributes of Allah to the degree that is possible and to the capacity that is possible for a human being to do so. And we have said that human beings are special to Allah, and Allah takes pride in them as being the best of His creation because of this innate ability to reflect these attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it is for this reason that you will see that out of all creation, human beings have all those attributes of Allah that Allah takes pride in Himself. Allah, of course, as the originator and the creator of everything, He could have chosen any attribute for Himself. But human beings, by their nature, they like whatever Allah praises Himself for. If Allah praises His love or His mercy or His knowledge or His power, you will find human beings like these qualities in themselves. If Allah would have reversed the whole manner in which He created humanity, it's hard for us to imagine. But supposing Allah would have taken pride in qualities like being unjust, or being ignorant, far, far away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it would have been our nature to like those qualities. And this is the meaning of those mystical interpretations that say that Allah created the human being in His own image. It is not that He is a physical being and that human beings physically resemble Allah. For He has no form. But it means that those attributes reflect in Him. And inshallah tomorrow or day after we will read and discuss an ayah of Qur'an from Surah Al-Ahzab where Allah talks about a trust that He gave to human beings. Inna aradna al-amanata ala as-samawati wal ard, that we gave a trust to the heavens, to the mountains, and to the earth and to the heavens, and they all refused, but the human being accepted. What does it mean, and what is this trust? And when we discuss this will become a little more clear to us. But in essence, human beings will always love those attributes that Allah takes pride in Himself. And whatever you find as a deficiency in a human being, those are not attributes that have any reality in and of themselves. They are simply a deficiency of the other attributes. In other words, ignorance is not an attribute in itself. Ignorance is only the lack of knowledge. Allah is all-knowing. Human beings know to the degree and capacity that they are able to know. The more closer one is to Allah, the more one knows. In other words, the more one partakes and shares of that all-knowing knowledge of Allah. Allah is all-loving and merciful. The closer that one is to Allah, the more surrendered one is to Allah, to that degree one has the capacity to show love and mercy to Allah's creation. In other words, the more one is able to be a conduit or to be a mirror in which those attributes reflect from Allah to the rest of the creation. So injustices or cruelty is nothing but an absence of that love and mercy. If one becomes absolutely devoid of the ability to reflect anything from Allah, then you will find complete injustice in them, or complete ignorance in them, or complete weakness in them, and so on and so forth. And it is for this reason that the Urafa say that human beings are nothing but the mirror of Allah. That is what makes them special. And this is also one interpretation to that famous hadith al-Qudsi that is known as the hadith of Kanz al-Makhfiyya, where Allah says, Kuntu kanzan makhfiyya, I was a hidden treasure, I wished to be known, so I created a particular creation so that I may be known. فَخَلَقْتُ خَلْقًا لِكَيْ أُعْرَفْ, I created this creation because this creation has the ability to reflect these attributes of mine out of their own free will. And it is along those lines that you will find other mystical traditions, such as, for example, the Hadith al-Qudsi, in which Allah says, لا يسعني أرضي ولا سماعي ولكن يسعني عبدي المؤمن. The heavens and the earth cannot encompass me, but my faithful, believing slave or servant is able to encompass me. Not that Allah can be contained in anything, but can be realized, can be known. Or for example, the tradition that says, Qalbul Mu'min Arshur Rahman. The heart of a believer is the throne of the merciful Lord. He, Allah, who does not sit on any throne, who is not up or down or left or right, who is everywhere, He says, I sit on the heart of a believer. So when a human being refuses to surrender, because of that resistance, they prevent Allah from sitting where He rightfully wishes to sit, and that is the heart of the believer. Now, what is the difference between a mirror? We said a believer or a faithful is a mirror that reflects the attributes of Allah. What is the difference between a mirror and a human being who acts like a mirror? The difference is that a human being has free will, a mirror does not have free will. And because of this, a human being can do kufr. A mirror cannot become kafir. This tells us then that free will, which is the good and the blessing of Allah that we can use to earn paradise, is also the reason that one denies Allah. You see, a mirror does not have free will. Many of us grew up reading stories, fairy tales. Many of you have heard of Snow White, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. What happens in Snow White? There is a queen who constantly asks the mirror, mirror, mirror on the wall, tell me who is the fairest of all. isn't it? This mirror has intelligence. It can speak back to the queen and tell her, you are the fairest of all. Or it can tell her that, no, Snow White is the fairest of all. So it can speak, it has intelligence. See what you're being taught from the time you are a child. This mirror also knows the unseen. It knows that there is another fair maiden somewhere far away over the hills who is more beautiful than you are. But what this mirror lacks is the capacity to lie. It cannot deny the truth. It knows the unseen, it is intelligent, but it has to speak the truth. If Allah would have made human beings without free will, they would have been the same. They would have been intelligent, but they would not have been able to disobey Allah. So you may have knowledge, you may know the unseen, but it is the same free will that gives us this capacity to be ungrateful to Allah. The word kufr actually is not denying Allah. The word kufr is actually to cover something, to hide something. That is why in Surah Al-Dahr, where Allah says, "Inna hadaynahu sabila," we have guided man and shown him the right path. Then He says, "Imma shakiran wa imma kafura." We have guided man to the right path. Now it is up to him if he wishes to be grateful, shakiran, or if he wishes to be kafura. So kufr is the opposite of shukr. When one accepts Allah, one is showing gratitude to Allah. One is acknowledging. One is being loyal that you have blessed me. Today when you give me a gift, there are ways in which I show gratitude to it. The first thing I do is I thank you. Isn't it? The second thing is I cherish and honor the gift you have given me. The third thing I do is I promote that gift. I tell everybody about it. Look at what this person has given me. That is how I show gratitude. On the other hand, if I hide it, and if somebody tells me, where did you get this from? I say, somebody came by and just left it here. I don't. That is called what? Kufr. That is because you are hiding your benefactor. So Allah cannot be denied. When one denies Allah, one is simply being ungrateful to Allah. Now, this brings us to another interesting discussion. Mullah Sadruddin Ash-Shirazi, well known as Mullah Sadra, he has a book called Kasr Asnam al-Jahiliyyah, Breaking the Idols of Ignorance. And by the grace of Allah, this book is actually now available in English. And I will quote some passages from it either tonight or tomorrow. But in this, as is common with all the mystics and the Urafa, they like to give this example of a human being being a mirror that reflects the attributes of Allah. Mullah Sadra says, supposing you take this parable or this analogy, that Allah is something very, very precious. Allah is a diamond. Allah is a beautiful, precious gemstone. And the human being is a mirror that reflects the light and the brilliance of this diamond. And you take this analogy of Allah and His creature with the example of a diamond and a mirror. He says, when you place a diamond before a mirror, the mirror will always reflect the brilliance. What are the reasons that a mirror might fail to reflect the light and the brilliance of that diamond? He gives 5 reasons. Keep in mind that relationship of Allah to His creatures, and then we will match them. The first reason he says is that the mirror itself is deficient. Today when they make mirrors, what they do is they take a piece of glass and on it they put a coating of liquid silver, or they put aluminium, or if you're North American, aluminum, right? They paint that on the glass and that is what gives you your mirror. In the olden days, what they used to do is they would take bronze or steel or iron and they would just polish it excessively until it became a brilliant reflective surface, and they used that as a mirror. Mullah Sadra says, when the mirror is being formed, obviously he writes from the past, so he talks of the polishing. He says, if the iron was not melted properly, or if it was not polished properly, and the mirror itself was deficient, then it will fail to reflect the beauty of that gemstone or that precious stone that is before it. That is one reason. The other reason is that the mirror was made perfectly, but after that some rust and some tarnish covered that mirror. So the mirror is salim, the mirror is fine, but it is now covered with an impurity that prevents it from having the ability to reflect that precious stone. The third reason is that the mirror is turned away from that precious stone. For example, the precious object is behind the mirror. So even though the mirror is present, even though it has no impurity, even though it is complete, and the precious stone is in the same room, they are not facing each other. That is why you do not see the reflection. The fourth reason is, there is a veil between the mirror and the precious object. So now they are facing each other, the mirror is complete, there is no tarnish on it. Here is the diamond, here is the mirror, but somebody has dropped a curtain between them. So now there is a veil between the two. And the fifth reason is that the person placing the mirror is ignorant of which direction that precious object is in. So he has not positioned the mirror where it should be so that the precious object will reflect itself. For example, the object is in front of it, but the mirror is tilted downwards or it is tilted upwards. So it does not see that precious object. It sounds very similar to the third reason, but there is a difference. In the third reason we said, the mirror is turned away from the object. In other words, now the object is not reflected because of a distraction. The mirror is distracted from the object. Whereas in the fifth reason, the reason is not a distraction or heedlessness. The reason is ignorance. In other words, now the person holding the mirror does not wish to turn away from the object. He wishes to turn towards the object, but he does not know where the object is. Now we take these 5 reasons and we now match them with what are the reasons that a human being will not reflect the attributes of Allah. In other words, what are the other obstacles that prevent us from knowing Allah? We take one for one. The first reason was that the mirror is deficient. Mullah Sadra says sometimes the essence of a human being is deficient. For example, a person is mentally handicapped. They lack the ability to comprehend and realize certain truths and realities. The reasons for that may be a separate discussion. Or for example, young children. You cannot take a young child and prevent them from developing an ego. This is a natural result of coming into this world. You can help a child not be very attached with the ego, such as not being selfish, learning to share with others, until such time as when they have developed their intellect enough to reflect and think about Allah. But in the early stages, a child is not able. There is a deficiency. The mirror is still being polished. It is not polished enough as yet. Or he says, for example, a person might have neglected religion altogether from the time of their childhood. So now they are adults, they are mature, they are intelligent, they are university professors maybe. But because they have never known religion or spirituality, even though they are not mentally handicapped, even though they are not children, they are deficient in their essence. And what was meant to actualize in a human being has never actualized from potentiality. Every human being has the potential to know and realize their creator, but that potentiality never actualizes. So they remain deficient in their essence. This is one reason why a person might not know Allah. The second reason was that the mirror is tarnished, or it is covered with rust. And the Quran attests to this. We said the heart is the center of that human being from which all this is reflected. Hence the saying of Allah that the heart of a believer is the throne of Allah. Now the Quran says, كَلَّا بَلْ رَانَ عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ مَا كَانُوا يَكْسِبُونَ. Nay, it is the rust on their heart because of what they have earned that prevents them from knowing the truth. So word for word, the Quran is saying there is rust on their heart. Or in some place the Quran uses the word locks. أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ أَمْ عَلَىٰ قُلُوبٍ أَقْفَالُهَا. Do they not reflect on the Quran, or are there locks on their hearts? So Mullah Sadr now says that excessive sinning, habitual sinning, disobedience to Allah, excessive indulgence in worldly pleasures, these are things that rust the heart and remove its ability to comprehend religious truths and spiritual realities. In fact, Mullah Sadr believed, and this is of course his own opinion, it doesn't necessarily agree with the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, or it may. He was a mystic par excellence, but he believed that if you commit a sin knowingly, not out of ignorance, it causes a damage to your soul that cannot be repaired even with repentance. There is a certain level of spiritual perfection that you will now not ever be able to attain because of that. So in other words, he believes it is irreversible, the damage. So he believes there are some kinds of rust that scratches the mirror itself and destroys the coating on the mirror, so that it now cannot be cleared by simply wiping or polishing that mirror. So excessive indulgence in worldly pleasure, sinning, disobedience to Allah is the second cause that will prevent one from knowing Allah. The third reason we said was that the mirror is turned away from the precious object so that it is behind it. He says this is the example of a person who is obedient to Allah, who is pious and righteous, but he or she is not actively pursuing and seeking Allah. He or she is so caught up with their worldly affairs. He or she is so busy trying to finish their worldly chores that they have no time, quote unquote, no time to think about pursuing spirituality or searching for Allah. And because he is caught up in fulfilling his physical needs and providing for his worldly affairs, his thoughts and his soul and his spirit is never directed towards Allah. Now he makes a fine point. He says, if a person is engaged in religious practices and rituals without thinking about Allah, without reflecting about Allah, because Allah praises that those who remember Him, He also says that they ponder on His signs. He says that they remember Allah وَيَذْكُرُونَ اللَّهَ قِيَامًا وَقُعُودًا وَعَلَى جُنُوبِهِمْ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاءِ رَبَّنَا مَا خَلَقْتَ هَذَا بَاطِلًا فَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. That those who remember Allah day and night, standing and sitting and reclining, in addition to remembering Allah, in addition to doing tasbih, they look at the signs of Allah. They think about them, they reflect upon them, they look at the heavenly bodies, they look at the human body, how it is created. Everything they see increases their conviction. It brings them to a conviction that if Allah created such beauty, such perfection, مَا خَلَقْتَ هَذَا بَاطِلًا, you could not have done this in vain and without purpose. There has to be a purpose behind all this. And if there is a purpose behind all this, then there is a day of judgment. Which brings them then to say, فَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ, then protect us from the fire of hell. So Allah shows that those who remember Allah are not just doing a'mals and du'as and tasbih without any they do tadhakkur, but they also do tafakkur. And so now the point that Mullah Sadr is making here is, he says, if a person engages only in rituals and does not think about Allah, he will never discover these spiritual realities. He will never remove these obstacles of knowing Allah. Keeping in mind the definition of knowing Allah is realizing one's connection and dependence on Him. He says, how then about a man who spends the best years of his life chasing his lusts, joys, attachments and desires? Will he really gain anything of true knowledge of God? If soul concerned with religious rituals can become obstacles, then what do you think of a man who spends the best years of his life chasing his lusts, joys, attachments and desires? Will he really gain any true knowledge of Allah? So this is the case of a man who doesn't have any rust on his heart. He is not committing sins. He is worshipping Allah. But he is so busy with dunya that the diamond is behind him. His mirror is in front. It is now reflecting other things. So it is not rusty, but the things it is reflecting are not Allah. It is reflecting sports, it is reflecting TV, it is reflecting games, it is reflecting money, status, social relationships, so on and so forth. The fourth example we said was the reason why something will not reflect in a mirror is if there is a veil between the mirror and the precious object. This, he says, is the example of one who is obedient, and who is controlling his desires, and who is focusing on seeking Allah, but he is veiled from Allah because of some beliefs that he acquired as a child, and he now follows them by imitation and holds on to them rigidly, refusing to look inward and question his beliefs. Not that one should question what one is certain about, but many a times when we come to learning knowledge, we don't come with humility, we come with pride. In other words, if you say something to me that disagrees with how I was raised and what my beliefs were, I can come to you in humility and say, I wish to learn. Tell me your perspective. Help me learn so that either I learn from you or you learn from me. This is one way of coming to knowledge. The other way of coming to knowledge is saying, no, I am right, you are wrong. I cannot be wrong. Because this is what I learned from the time I was a child. Now, when you come with that rigidness, then he says that rigidness becomes a veil. Now, the mirror is polished. There is sincerity. The person is pious. There is no rust on the mirror. And he is actively seeking Allah. But that presumptions and those ideas and beliefs that he is not willing to relinquish become a veil between him and Allah. Now, there is something he says that is a little sensitive, so I do not wish to say it in my own words. I will quote him word for word. He says, "This is also a great veil by which most of the theologians and bigots of the religious sects, rather even most of the righteous ones who contemplate on the kingdom of the heavens and the earth are veiled. For they are veiled by some conventional beliefs that have frozen in their hearts and rooted in their souls, and have become a veil between them and knowing the truth." And if you go back to the lectures we did earlier, several years ago on the end of negative suffering, when we talked about the formation of the ego, we talked about a term that psychologists use that is called map making. And what they say is that when a child is growing and developing, and they are learning so many things around them and how things work and what are the rules of society and how to behave and interact with people and what is it that people like to hear and see, what is it that people are offended by, they slowly form a certain idea of who they are and what the world is to them. And this combination of who I am, what is the world, who is God, why am I here, what is my purpose in life, all these collectively form what is my world view. This world view then creates a map for me. This map is what guides me in my life. I now journey through life based on this map. Most people are too frightened to re-look at that map. If I've always gone to Montreal by this, using this method and this highway, and this is what I've fixed on my GPS, or this is what I've highlighted on my map, I will stick to that all the time. Supposing someone was to tell me, by the way, there is a shorter way. Have you ever tried this? Then there is two reactions to it, isn't it? There is one who will say, let me at least look at it. There is another who will say, no, this has always worked for me. This is going to be my map. Refusal to re-look at one's map. Understand, of course, there is a difference between core beliefs. I do not say that we go back and question our core beliefs in our religion. But what I say is that many a times we may do things out of culture, out of superstition, and we may refuse to even question or even accept what someone says. A marja'a mujtahid might say something, but because it opposes what I have from childhood, I will oppose it. That becomes a veil. The fifth reason we said was that ignorance, where a person has a mirror and wants to reflect the precious object in the mirror, but there is ignorance of where that precious object is. I know it is somewhere in this room. I have a mirror. I want to see how this brilliant diamond, when it reflects in the mirror, the spectrum of light, how the white light splits into multiple colors and shows its radiance and beauty. But I don't know where the diamond is. So now there is no rust. There is no corruption. There is no veil. There is no being busy with the world. I am fully focused. I am willing to remove all veils. But I am ignorant. Where is the object to find? And it is on this that Mullah Sadra says that it is impossible to find the truth except through certain channels. And these channels will provide you knowledge that has to be arranged in the heart in a particular method. Just like if you're building something from blocks, when you've played with a child and built things from blocks, everybody's done that, isn't it? If you put the small block first, and then the big one, and then the big one, and then the big one, and it keeps getting bigger, you have all the pieces there, but it is not steady, it is shaky, it falls. So the idea is not just to construct that edifice, but the idea is the order in which it is constructed has to be solid. In other words, Mullah Sadra says that some people, for example, don't do their basic wajibat, and they're talking of irfan and tasawwuf and Sufism and mysticism and so on and so forth. You are placing the objects in the wrong order, it will topple. It has to enter the heart in the right order. Not only that, but he says, knowledge of God can be acquired only with certain types of knowledge coming together. These knowledge, when they come together, they produce a new type of knowledge, a third type of knowledge, which is the realization of Allah, how present He is and how connected I am to it. He says it is like if you want a child, you bring a man and a woman together. Then he gives another example. He says, supposing you want a mare or a particular type of horse. Cows can reproduce, donkeys can reproduce, human beings can reproduce, but you can't bring a cow and a donkey and get the kind of horse you want. You have to get the right, and those who know about horses will tell you that the horses, their lineages are also maintained. And people sit and reflect which lineage of which horse we want to keep with which horse to produce what kind of horse. So you have to selectively see that this Arabian horse will produce this. In the same manner, he says, knowledge has to be carefully guided. It has to come from the right source. It has to be the right type of knowledge. It has to be arranged in a particular order. Otherwise, he says, another parable is like that of a man who stands before a mirror and wishes to see his back. Supposing you stood in front of a mirror and you want to see your back. Can you do it with one mirror? You cannot. You can turn around, but you won't see the mirror. So you need another mirror. Can you keep both the mirrors in front of you? No, you will still not see your back. So it has to be arranged in a particular way, isn't it? So now you have more than one mirror. You have more than one form of knowledge. And it has to be placed in a particular order. One has to be in front, one has to be behind. Now where are you seeing your back? That also is very complex. It is not simple. You are not seeing your back because of the mirror in front of you, because otherwise you would have seen it without the mirror behind you. You are not seeing it in the mirror behind you because you're not looking behind. So your back is being reflected behind. Your back is reflected on the mirror behind, which is reflected on the mirror in front. And then you are looking at it. So your eyes fall on the mirror in front, which shows a reflection of the mirror behind, which shows a reflection of your back. There is a complexity to it. Knowledge, he says, is like that. Even theoretical knowledge has sources from which it must be acquired. There is a way for them to come together to unification, and how they are acquired and required must be produced. And that is why you will find that we constantly emphasize that when you take knowledge, even if it is of the Quran, take it from Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Why is this so important? It's not just that it is knowledge. You can get knowledge from many places, but some knowledges will confuse you. Not everything you hear in the form of knowledge, not everything that pretends to be knowledge is knowledge. You see, there is an ayah of Quran where Allah says, فَلْيَنْظُرِ الْإِنسَانِ إِلَىٰ طَعَامِهِ. Let man look at the food he eats. Let man look at the food he eats. Now there is miracles in the food, of course. If you look at the fruits, if you look at the vegetables, if you look at what we eat, how they're made, the colors, every color has a particular significance, give you a particular type of vitamin. Every weather, cold, heat produces, and there's so much you can learn from foods that will increase your conviction in Allah. But when this ayah was asked from Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. What does it mean, Yabna Rasulillah, فَلْيَنْظُرِ الْإِنسَانِ إِلَىٰ طَعَامِهِ? He said, let insan see from where his knowledge is coming. Just like food sustains your body, knowledge sustains your soul. Food might look very nice. Something might look very nice, very delicious, but it might be poisonous. Just because it is poisonous doesn't mean it will look ugly or it will smell. And some things might have a strong smell, but it might be very healthy for you. So you see the source of the knowledge. Where is it coming from? Otherwise it will create damage, not good. This is very, very important. And this is why if this knowledge is not taken from the right people, from the right source, and that is the emphasis we bring to say that it is not possible that if Allah revealed a final revelation and a final book and a final messenger, He would leave the ummah to themselves to say, you go figure out yourself who you will take knowledge from and how you will take and how you will understand the Quran. There has to be someone to preserve this knowledge, to preserve this heritage, to show us exactly how to take this knowledge in what order. So if the first knowledge I acquire from source A is impure, and the second knowledge I acquire from source B is godless, then the result of my knowledge of my soul will be denial of God. And if the first source is pure, but the second source is impure, somebody has corrupted it, then the result of that will be doubt, because I will waver between the two. But if the first source is pure, and the second source is pure, and the third source is pure, and they all come in the right order, then you will see this wholesome knowledge that will bring conviction, that will bring realization, that will bring faith, and that will all come together and unify and show, open one's eyes to what is real knowledge, to knowing Allah, in the real sense of knowing Him, His presence, and feeling His connectedness. Now, in the interest of time, I will stop here for tonight and continue tomorrow, inshaAllah. Yes, it is best that we stop here so that we can actually continue from here tomorrow. And tomorrow night, inshaAllah, as you all know, we mark the wafat of Sayyidah Zainab bint Ali salawatullahi wa salamu alayha. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad, Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And we will then see as well in her character and in her personality how she shows us the meaning of surrender. And what sort of qualities she radiates because of having this surrendered state before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is why I mentioned yesterday as well that loving the Ahlul Bayt includes following in their footsteps, looking at examples from their lives, how they behaved. Look at Imam Ali alayhi salam, for example. Even though when his right was taken and for 25 years he had to watch his rights being plundered, he never said, I will not help Islam. Whenever anyone came to him and asked him a question, he thought, what is good for Islam? He could have easily said, well, when it was my right you didn't give me, now you're coming to me, go away, figure it out yourself. If you want me to help you, give me my right first. Which is how many of us would react, isn't it? Because he is surrendered, because it is only for Allah, it is not for the ego, it is not for the self. And you see this quality, and tomorrow inshallah we'll talk extensively about Sayyidah Zainab. But even up to Imam Hussein alayhi salam, we see that state of surrenderedness just as a word to remember Imam Hussein alayhi salam, that in his last moment as well, when he is in prostration, a man comes close to him to listen to what are the final words of Aba Abdullah alayhi salam. He is praying to Allah and saying, Oh my Lord, aitamtu iyali likay arak. My Lord, I have orphaned my children so that I may come and see you. By Allah, he says, Oh Allah, if they cut me into pieces, irban irba, lama hanna al-fu'ad ila siwak. My heart will not yearn and long for anyone besides you, O Allah. So we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on this night, O Allah, bihaqqi Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. We come to you sincerely as followers of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad, asking you, O Allah, give us the tawfiq that before our physical bodies die, we learn the true meaning of surrender, and that we learn to follow Muhammad and Ali Muhammad, so that they too are proud of us Yawmul Qiyamah. O Allah, bihaqqi Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad, we ask you for ta'ajil and to hasten the appearance of our Imam. We ask you to grant health to those who are ill and maghfirah to those who have passed away. رَبَّنَا تَقَبَّلْ مِنَّا إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ. Salawat ala Muhammad.